Hello, this is Silas. I'm back with Steven. Say what's up.
Good afternoon. Hope you all had a great 4th of July.
Yeah, we're recording this on the day after 4th of July, and it's been a lot of food, a lot of people eating the typical hot dogs, barbecue type of thing in the United States of America. There's other things. One of my best 4th of July experiences was went to one of my friends. I was going to school in the hills of West Virginia, and one of my friends had me over to his relative's place, to his family's place. I think it was his grandma's place. Might have been the grandpa's. I don't know. It was something. And they had a deep fried turkey in like some small town in West Virginia, and just remember it was a good experience. Stephen, yours.
I went to actually went to Hill Country Barbecue where we used to go for some of the meetup groups.
Oh,
I had half a pound of brisket, half a pound of beef shoulder, and some green bean casserole and sweet potato. I wanted to have the corn pudding. The corn pudding is really nice, but they were out of it. They were also out of ribs, which I thought about, but it was, of course, 4th of July. It was a busy place. Everyone's ordering stuff, so it happens.
Yeah. So this is part of our You Are What You Consume series. The sub series is Dish on Dish. I'm thinking I'm going to ask you all out there. We're still deciding the name. Dish on Dish, Dishing on Dish, Dish on Dishes, Dishing on Dishes, Dishing Dish, or Dish Dishing. Because the slang of dish is just like when you just give the dish the inside word. Well, what's the dish on this situation? And then dishes themselves, the actual foods that we're eating. So that is the general idea of this. This is part of a long conversation series talking about different topics that I've had with Stephen. And just let us know what you think about the different names of that, Stephen. What do you think? And just tell us a bit about the restaurant that we're talking about today, which is DB Bistro. DB Bistro.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. So the full name is DB Bistro Moderne. It opened in 2001. This is one of Daniel Boulud's restaurants. I want to say it was his third restaurant, I think, because I think Daniela, that's a flagship that opened in 94. Cafe Boulud was a little after. Then this one was 2001. Then he had a few others since then. This is sort of that. It's somewhere in between the extremes of it's not really high end like Danielle where you sit down for an hour or two, have 10 plus courses, it's white tablecloth, jacket required. It's not like that. But at the same time, Bar Boulud, which is one of the sister restaurants where I used to work, that was actually my first job in the city. That was a bistro. That's casual. Like you can come in jeans, t-shirt, sit at the counter, whatever. This is kind of in between that. They're white tablecloth. Some of the staff dresses up kind of nice, but it's not jacket required, all that. This restaurant's located in Midtown. It's near Times Square. It's one of the few actually very good Midtown restaurants. It's funny. I probably, out of the restaurants we're covering, I've probably been there the most. I have a lot of pictures, which of course we're going to get into and go over. I'm trying to think of the street. I think it's 44th Street. It's near the Sofitel Hotel and the Algonquin. Those are pretty big mainstays. They've been around a very long time. Again, it's to the east of Times Square, not quite as far as Grand Central, but if you picture where Times Square is, it's in that area. So the way I found out about this place was, again, I knew some people who did their externship for culinary school here, and a few of them actually went back and ended up working there. I know one of them ended up becoming executive sous chef at Bar Boulud, where I work now. This was after I left, sometime down the road. Another guy, actually, he externed at DB Bistro, went back, got a job there. He left, came back as the executive chef, and he actually ran the place for a bit, which was kind of cool. So I've come in these various iterations. I also found out recently, I was telling Silas that the current executive chef at Minetta Tavern used to be chef of DB Bistro. I got to say hi to him. We met at one point a while ago. I mean, I don't know him well, but we have some mutual friends and all this. And he also was executive sous chef at Bar Boulud shortly before I worked there. So it's all kind of connected. So I'm trying to think of when I first came. It was shortly after I came to the city, maybe like 2011, 2012. Again, it's gone through different iterations because the different chefs coming and going. Each one tweaks it a little bit. There are a few staples on the menu, which of course I'll get into. But again, each chef kind of brings their own brand, and then those chefs move on and do other things. The new chef comes in, moves on, does other things. It's really interesting, but it's always been, I think, value-wise in terms of the price versus value, it's one of my favorite places in the city for sure.
All right, good. And what's the ambiance wise? Like ambiance, how would you define really ambiance? Is it more because like you talked about the forgetting the name, you just mentioned it, the barbecue place you went to.
Hill Country Barbecue.
Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. That's a kind of a fun place. You just jump in with your friends. You can sit. You can have loud, raucous conversations. Yeah. You go up and you just order your food, and they come out and they serve it in different kind of things. It's not really served to the table type of thing. At least that's was my experience there. I think ambiance is more what's the general thing? Like if you're partying after like a graduation and you want to have a not rough and tumble, it's an old man, like a more raucous time. I think there's certain restaurants where that's not really not
Appropriate.
really in. It might even be a situation, it's not simply dress code. I think there's something extra to what ambiance is. Like some places where you imagine piano music being played, versus some places where there's no music because you're just chilling and thinking, or some places where there's like a sports game going on, there's people cheering. They think that's kind of that plays into a part into the enjoyment of the food, and some of those things match with the food. Sometimes you'll go to a place and you're focused more on the food, and I don't know what do you think about ambiance, and what do you think about the importance of ambiance, and what is the ambiance of this restaurant?
Well, as I was starting to get at, again, it's one of those in between where it's not very high end like Danielle, where you need the jacket, tie. The women, you have to wear either a business suit or a nice dress, but at the same time, it's not obviously it's not a dive bar. You're not going to come in and yell and everything. But the other thing you have to think about this too is it's the environment, but it's also the price point. I mean, for example, this foie gras burger, which we're going to get into, is about $34 each. So a college kid who just wants to get drunk is probably not going to hang out there. Now, if you go to DB, you're going to see a mix. There'll be people dressed casually. There'll be men with suit and ties on. A lot of business people who work in Times Square or that area. Uh, the staff, like I say, I mean, I think the maitre d', of course, has like suit and tie on. The tables are white tablecloth in the back, but there's also a nice wooden communal table. It's like a nicer table, but it's a little more casual. You wouldn't go to Danielle and sit at a communal table, for example. So it's kind of that in between of it's because I mean it is called a bistro, so it is slightly on the casual side, but it's not a burger joint. It's an elevated bistro. Yeah.
And that communal table, for the people who might not be too familiar with the term, that's where you go and you sit there, and they could be, it's like maybe a 10-person seating table, and you go there, you party of two, they might be a party of four already there, and midway through your meal, some three other people might join you, and it's a different style of eating. Some people don't like eating in that kind of public situation. Some people have no problem with it. I don't really have a problem with that. Even no, I don't think I've ever gone to a restaurant, even the ones that don't have that, where I would really necessarily mind that. But I guess that depends. If you want to have maybe a romantic kind of night, you might not want that in particular or something. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Well, I was going to say, I usually come in by myself and sit at the bar. I usually talk to the bartender. I do that here. I've sat at the communal table before. Sometimes I've sat at a table, but it was just me by myself. I don't know. I feel kind of alone. I mean, I don't need company, but communal table, okay, I have people to talk to. Bar, I have people to talk to, all this. It was funny. I had an experience at Minetta Tavern a few weeks ago where this guy was sitting next to, I think, a woman he was on a date with, and I was talking to him, and the guy was seeming kind of annoyed with me. But I thought it was weird. I was thinking to myself, if you're at a date, why do you sit at the bar, though? That's a communal thing. Why not? Like, I mean, I did back off after a little bit, but I'm thinking to myself, if you're on a date, wouldn't you want a table so you're intimate and people don't talk to you? I don't know. I thought that was kind of strange. You'd sit at a communal thing and be annoyed if, you know.
Yeah, maybe she wanted the table, and that was already part of what was putting him off. Maybe she wanted the bar, wanted the communal area, and she was just.
Yeah.
Some of these people, there is the people who date to dish. They just date for meals and things like that. That is not a completely unheard of thing anymore. Yeah. Okay, so talking about the dating for the meals, can you tell us a bit about the menu? Like, is it a fixed? Some places have fixed price combos. Like I remember there was one place I think the first time I really remember seeing this was this place, Maggiano's, which is I think it's a bit of a chain, but it was a place we went to in the DC area. I remember going there for the final game, after the final game of the football banquet for my senior year. We went there, and they had the fixed menu, which is a thing where it's like you pay a certain price, and it comes with a dessert, an entree, an appetizer, an entree, a dessert, and then maybe something to drink, some coffee after. And also, can you tell us, is it the menu itself, whatever's on the menu, is it a fixed menu, or is it seasonal or varied, or tell us a bit about it?
So it's actually pretty cool, and Bar Baluto is kind of similar. They have multiple menus you can do. There's a prefix. I want to say it's 3 courses for $60. I might not have that exactly right, but it's something like small appetizer, entree, dessert, and then if you want to get different entrees, there's a supplemental price because the items are usually more expensive. I think they have a pre-theater menu. It's similar story, although it features specific items. they also have brunch. They have a late night menu. It's pretty cool. Sofitel, the hotel, they actually do room service for them. So you can order a croque monsieur, the grilled cheese from there, which is kind of nice. So they also have restaurant week. We'll go through some of those photos. I went with my family. I'm trying to remember. Lunch is really good for restaurant week. I think you only spend 20 something. It's like 20 something bucks, maybe 30 if you get an additional course. But again, quality of food, the value you get is great. I mean, the portions are a bit smaller, but still what you get is definitely worth what you pay for, in my opinion, anyway. So I tend to do a la carte just because portions are a little bigger. There's more variety. Again, you have to spend a little more money, but for me, it's worth it. So that's just me.
Yeah. Work ahead in your different times. And with this series, we go into deep dive into actual dishes. Like Stephen has given me a list of different dishes, and the images of the dishes will be coming up. I think, Stephen, we normally had a thing on the side we're talking, but this one I'll try to do it where we don't really do too much with our hands and stuff like that. We're not really showing too many diagrams. So I think on this one, I'll try the video with not having our faces even on it. Once we get into the food, it'll just be the main food itself and the different things we're talking about, with the images coming up with that. And this one's more of a deep dive. We go into many different dishes. This will probably be divided in at least 2 parts. But let us know, because like you mentioned with the Hill Country Barbecue, and here in Nairobi, Kenya right now, it's Nairobi Pizza Week. There's a few places I might consider going out to check out and do some little shorts on that. So we'll also be publishing some more shorts on that. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube or in other locations, I will be leaving timestamps on YouTube. It actually, you jump to the timestamp, but I'll be leaving the different timestamps for the different dishes that you can eat. But as I mentioned, we'll have these deep dive ones, and then we'll have just smaller ones. Like next time, or if it's a smaller place that you're going to, just getting one dish, maybe just do like a short video. If I go to one of these pizza week restaurants, I'll just do like a short video and post on just that. So just do different kind of menus. Some things will be appetizers. This is more of the entree type of type of deal with this, and maybe the dessert equivalent of what we're doing with this dish on dish thing might be something maybe we talk more about food that is not related in particular to a particular restaurant, but just kind of to tie off this ideas about foods and things like that. I don't know.
And we'll get into it. We'll get into it too, but you'll notice I've enjoyed a lot of desserts here. Again, this is it's interesting because Huertas, they are obviously a great restaurant, but they only have 2 desserts. They're probably going to change them soon, but again, that's not the kind of place you go for dessert anyway. Minetta Tavern has some nice ones too. I've tried some since we did our video, but DB always has really creative desserts. DB is one of those that I look at the dessert menu, I'm often torn between about 3 or 4 different things, because there's the flavors, the pairings, the presentation. Again, we'll get into it, but Bar Balloon, where I used to work, it was a similar thing. I was always sort of torn on which dessert I wanted to try, and that to me is really impressive when you have to like really decide what you want to get.
I was listening to the No Agenda podcast, the best podcast in the world. It's where I listen to most of my news. I'm sure there's some of you in the morning to you out there that have actually listened. There's chances because I also post this on the No Agenda social network. But anyway, there's just many of those people out there. So someone listening will also listen to that. But I was listening to the recent one. They were talking about how a restaurant in San Francisco, there's a particular restaurant, they did this whole thing of making sure the desserts were just really bomb, really amazing. Because there's that whole thing, and they did actual, they've done studies and questionnaires on people, just to people to rate restaurants. And people normally do that whole thing where they go and have the entree and the dessert. You know, they have the full thing, appetizer, entree, dessert. But very few people just go for desserts, which I don't know why people don't do that more. I would do that more, start with a dessert. But anyway, they have that in their mind to go through that process. But when they do that, if you have the dessert being the greatest part of it, that normally gets restaurants to get higher scores, because that's the last memory that they have walking out of the door. Mm-hmm. So some restaurants that don't go with the desserts, maybe they'll put more energy into having more delectable or more diverse or more interesting kinds of entrees, because they know they can't rely on the dessert. But I think even if you've been to several restaurants yourself, think about it. Do you prefer the restaurants that have better desserts? Do you prefer restaurants in general that even have, think about certain restaurants that you've gone to that have many desserts versus the ones that don't have them. Which ones do you prefer? And according to this one study, it showed that people who have the good desserts, and it's known in the restaurant, in the food industry, that some chefs and some people running restaurants actually specifically say we have to focus on getting really good desserts so we can let people go out to the door with a good taste, a good memory of the place.
Well, we can maybe cover it down the line, but we used to go to, well, I went on my own, but I also went with my family. There's a Spot dessert bar on St. Mark's. I don't know if you ever went there. That's all it is. It's featuring desserts, and they had this monkey bread with It's like a cinnamon bread thing with ice cream. They had a durian dessert. They have different green tea stuff. Really good. That was one of those places I remember. I had dinner with my family a few years ago. We went there after. I thought it was really nice, but it just features dessert and it's always popular. I mean, it's one of those. It's pretty full, and you may have to wait for a table even. So it's a little. There's two little locations next to each other. They're very. I'm not gonna say hole in the wall. It's pretty small though, but I mean they do a good business there. They always have some very interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we can do. We could probably think about expanding this and doing some ones where we do targeted ones where you just go find a dessert or find an appetizer, and maybe smaller places or even places that are bigger, but you just have a need to taste this because some of the places you haven't had frequented anywhere close to as much as you have DB Bistro or Huertas or Minetta Tavern as we've done with these first three. Yeah.
Sure. All right.
Okay, so you ready?
Yep. Let's jump in.
Okay, so thank you all for listening, guys, gals, and everything else between. And now we're getting right into the food. And again, this is DB Bistro Moderne. Moderne. Is it Moderne?
Moderne. Because remember in French, the E.
Yeah. So is this French? Bistro?
Yeah, French. Yeah.
French,
yeah.
French
Danielle Beluda is French. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So it's going to be again the French. The first one we did, Minetta Tavern, had some kind of new age French, and then going back to some really old kind of French things. Like, was it the lobster thermidor? Or was your friend said like, what is this, like 1930 or something?
Oh, that was the vol au vent. He said, "Is this France in 1972?" Yeah.
So, but this one's going to be more upbeat. But let's just see. Let's just discover this as we go. With the way we do this, Steven has sent me these ahead. I haven't really discussed with him just the ideas and thoughts that come to my mind while he's talking about these foods. And he's been in the food industry, as he's mentioned in some of the previous ones, and he's worked in some of these places. So he has really just insightful food knowledge. It's just really interesting to hear him talk about these things and find out about these different things. Oh, one last question that I will be including. What is the challenge level in general? If you see the food here and you think this is some great food, like what's the challenge level of finding the ingredients for these foods and being able to make these on yourselves in general? What do you think it's about?
I think it sort of depends on the dish. I mean, we'll get into some of the foie gras, the terrines, and the torchon. Those are a little more labor intensive. I had touched on those a little bit in the last section. Some of these things, like the first one here, which we're about to get into, I think is fairly easy. You could make it home. I mean, it'll take a little bit of time, obviously, but you're paying, when you buy it, you're paying for the labor because you don't want to put the effort in. The dishes, we're going to get into, are pretty advanced. Those, I mean, I'm not going to say you can't make them at home, but you're probably going to have some skill with pastry and sugar and some of that. Ice cream too. Ice cream is not that hard to make. I mean, of course, they sell ice cream makers. You can make ice cream at home now. What else was I going to say? Some of these other things, I think Thomas Keller has talked about this too. Some of these things, you can even just take certain components from certain dishes and just make those and put them with other things if you don't want to do the whole dish. Because he acknowledges, as do I, that, okay, not everybody has a culinary background, so it may not be easy to recreate. But at the same time, it'd be a shame if you missed out on certain things that you could easily make yourself. So why not just take a certain sauce and put it on another dish or something?
That's one thing that I've said about like one of the positives, one of the things I encourage anybody to learn how to cook better is the more you know how the things are made, the more you can appreciate when somebody does it in a great way. And for me, that's one of the things I look for when I'm in a restaurant and picking the menu. I look, is that something I think I can make myself? Or is that something that I understand is really difficult to make, that the chances of me making at home are very low? And that will get more points to leaning towards me actually trying the things that I can't make myself, or that might inspire me to make it in a different way. That's something that I do when I go there. Checking the website, the last one we did was Huertas, and Huertas offered online training classes, so that's probably some of the dishes that they make there. That's not here on DB Bistro. But does the chef or the cook here have a cookbook or recipe book that you're aware of?
Danielle Belude has a few cookbooks, a few books in general, actually. He has Letters for a Young Chef. I have a copy for that. That's one of those. You could probably tell it's advice to people who want to cook for a living. He has another one. I got to check. I forget the name of it, but they actually feature this burger in it. They have the recipe and things like that. And then there's just things him talking about. It's a combination of cookbook. It's a cookbook, but it's also him talking about his inspirations, things he enjoys in the city, how that influenced him, how he's developed. And then, I think he has a few other cookbooks too, but I'm not sure how many at this point, because these ones I think were written a number of years ago now, but I think he has some that are a little more recent, but I'd have to look up. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. Okay, so you've come along with us a bit. This is the intro, and you said this is the first part. In the second part that we have this, the intro won't be in there. We'll just get directly into the food. But as I mentioned, there's timestamps, and now we're getting into the first one, which is an appetizer.
Sure.
You ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. So here we go with the amuse-bouche, which is crispy polenta, tomato compote, tomato compote. Is it compote or compote?
Compote. It's the
Compote
E is
and
silent. Yeah.
okay, and parmigiano-reggiano.
All right. So an amuse-bouche, for those who don't know, it translates in French amuse like amusement, and then bouche is actually a human mouth in contrast to a gueule, which is an animal mouth. Now, in higher end places, this part of the meal is called amuse-bouche. The idea is that it's higher end, so it's for human mouths, whereas amuse-gueule, animal mouth. So, for example, a bar will serve peanuts, and that'll be called an amuse-gueule. It's an amusement for an animal. The other theory behind that was that a lot of chefs, because they were always yelling and screaming and they were lower class, it was like the kind of food that they ate. That was a French chef in school told us. So again, it's not 100% clear, but an amuse-bouche, the idea is it's something that sort of wakes up the palate. So in this case, it's crispy polenta. Polenta, it's similar to cornmeal. It's basically cooked usually you can do with milk, you can do with stock, different things, usually butter to finish. In this case, what they do is they punch it out and they actually fry it so it gets crispy. Tomato compote, of course, it's a sauce. Compote, it's a sauce. Usually it can be similar to a puree that's underneath. I'm not 100% sure what was in this. I mean, it's been a while now, but my guess is they probably put some acid in there to make it brighten it up a little, some parsley. There's some more tomatoes on top, the tomato confit, that's the tomato simmered in olive oil with the herbs, garlic, and other things. And then parmigiano-reggiano, that's the cheese from the Parma region. That's considered the authentic Parmesan, what we call Parmesan, but that's the real stuff grated over top. So again, this is the amuse-bouche I had one of the times I was there. So this is just something they give you off the bat, unless you have an allergy or restriction, they'll give you something else. And it's always complimentary. You don't get charged. It's just sort of wake up your palate. Yep. Thoughts or comments? Yep.
Yeah. So this is amuse-bouche. That's an upgrade on the average like breadsticks that you get at many places. That looks nice, and you started off with that. And yeah, I really like the plating. It looks very interesting. Crispy polenta. In Kenya and some Western African places, some Eastern African places, they have this thing called ugali. That's what they call it in Kenya, in Swahili. But there's other terms. I think simai is what it's called in some things, where a lot of cultures have this whole like cornmeal type of thing. Even though I'm not quite sure. I don't think maize is maize indigenous to Africa. I think this might be something that was actually added in, but it's like a maize meal. And here in Kenya, we do this thing. The introduction and spread of maize into Africa. Yeah, maize was probably introduced into tropical Africa more than one point, many times. So I don't know. It was introduced. It wasn't like humans knew what maize was and they brought it into. It wasn't like something here. But now many cultures in Africa, because corn itself is a very useful thing. This is You Are What You Consume type of series. And there's one thing in specific I just listened to. I forget the channel's name. This guy is like holistic, used to be an Olympian or something, an athlete. He has this channel where he's talking about things of different corn. He was talking about why was Mexico able to, the Mexicans, why were they able to survive on corn and beans and things like that for so long without having obesity? And then it's like 40% of their diet is corn-based, like corn food-based, like tortillas and things like that. So that came out, and he's talking about the reason is mostly the sugars and the processed forms of corn. And one thing that's key about corn is it gets the different carbohydrates. Most plants and things like that break carbohydrates down from the air, from oxygen. They break the carbon they break the carbon down that's in the air, carbon dioxide. They turn it into the thing that makes it substantial, into the calories that have it. And there's ways, the corn itself does it breaks it down and holds it to like 4 different proteins or 4 different things. I get the extra term. You can tell I'm not a food scientist, any kind of scientist. 4 different elements where most plants do 3. So there's a way to go in and test and see what percentage of the actual nutrients or the foods that we're eating have the percent from corn. What makes up what it is from corn mostly, like You Are What You Consume. That's part of this series. With that, they said like most sodas and things like that are 100% corn based. All the different things you're eating that make up that are created have some corn base off of it. They said like burgers, you go to like a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, it's like 70% corn based, because even the beef in there is a corn fed cow. So the cow itself is ingested pretty much just corn. So majority of the mass of the cow is made by breaking down corn and transferring it into cow elements, and the cow beef itself and other things would have the three elements of these things. So anyway, all that long thing to just say corn is a very common thing. This is one of the things that it's very easy to make. These things. Ugali is pretty much just porridge, just harder. Same thing with polenta. It's kind of in between porridge and it's in between porridge and ugali, because ugali is normally like really solid. I don't know how to describe the solidness compared to food.
Well, I was going to say polenta, it's been compared to grits. That's a pretty accurate comparison.
Yes.
I'd say depending on how you make it, because again, some people put butter in, some people just do stock and finish with butter. I've seen some people cook with milk. Like you can do different things, but it's similar to grits. I mean, grits, I think the seasoning and things would be different, but if that's a comparison that I usually bring up, because if people enjoy grits, they think, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And here they seem to, it seems to be they're making it look more solid, or is it very spongy even when after they fry?
So what I was gonna say is you add less liquid, or you cook the liquid out so it's a little more solid, and then once it cools down, it solidifies, and you stamp it out, then you fry those. And what I was gonna bring up too, maybe we can do it in another video, but my old job, Batella, which I showed you about the nice place in Jersey City on the water, the chef there actually did polenta fries, and what he did was he punched them out. They looked almost like French toast sticks, and he would fry those, and he would serve them with a cheese sauce, and you would dip them in and eat them. It's pretty good.
Yeah. So something like this, it's easy to get. The corn, it's actually just corn and water and some salt or other flavoring that you want. That's the basics. You can add all these other things to it, as Stephen has mentioned. And there's very many recipes to make. If you can boil water and stir, you can make polenta. So this is one of the ones where I think it's a good thing to try. And then now, once you know how to make the basics, you just change the level of water in it, and you can do all kinds of amazing things like this. Amuse-bouche is this something rather that I think you can make. The key thing on this, I think, is the parmigiano-reggiano. That's one thing that maybe I'm just a bit of a bougie person. From traveling around, there's certain foods once I've had the original, it's not even just the original, something like Oreos. Once I've had Oreos, it's not like high cuisine or anything. But if I go to a place and there's like an imitation of Oreo, I'm not going to get it, because Oreo is so specifically the Oreo taste. Like that taste is very Oreo. Anything else to me is just like, I might as well go with that. And Parmigiano-Reggiano is one thing, like Parmesan cheese. To me, I really like cheese a lot, and this is one of the cheeses where I'm just like, if you're not going to get like the actual genuine thing, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's kind of, once you get the actual thing, it's one of the more expensive cheeses when you actually get the one. So if you see it for really cheap, chances are you're not really getting the authentic thing. And if you've never had the authentic thing, try to save up, try to find it, and it really is something special. Just the nature of it, it's almost like the least cheese-like cheese out there, because it's like hard and gritty, can have this powdery self. It's so many amazing things to it. It's a great cheese in my estimation.
Definitely. All right.
And I like how they have this kind of grated kind of, it's a nice plating. That looks like cilantro.
That's parsley. So if you look closely with cilantro, I'm trying to think how to put it into words, but I guess
more like a weed leaf.
Well, the ridges are a little more pronounced. With parsley, the ridges are a little more broad and smoothed out. With cilantro, they're more rigid. They're pointier, and there's more of them, smaller.
There's also like many different forms of parsley, but yeah, I mean, with this, I can imagine myself doing some kind of Kenyan version with it, where I switch out maybe cilantro is more common in Kenya. I don't know what cheese I would do. What's like more Kenyan type of cheese? I don't know. Maybe just like do like.
I have no idea. Sorry.
Try it. But yeah, okay.
Well, I was also going to say, what you're getting at with parsley is this is the Italian parsley. It's also called flat parsley. There's also the curly parsley, which you've probably seen in tabbouleh and other things. That's the finer stuff that you would cut up. That's more, I guess that's more Middle Eastern. This is more Southern Europe. So French cooking, they tend to use a lot of the Italian parsley, whereas, again, tabbouleh and other things, you would use that curly parsley.
Cool. All right. Yep. So anything else?
That's all.
Okay, so on to the next one. So now we have another amuse-bouche, which is roasted dates with bacon vinaigrette, and that sounds amazeballs.
It really was. So similar things. So you see the dried dates here. The bacon vinaigrette, I'm trying to remember what was in that. I mean, it was bacon. There's a little bit of the fat, because you think about it, a vinaigrette, there's oil in it typically. And there was a bit of vinegar as well. I mean, obviously it's in the name. The idea is the vinegar cuts through the fat. I think it was probably champagne vinegar or something, if I could recall. So the idea is you have the crunchiness of the bacon. It's dressed last minute. That way the bacon doesn't get soggy. But you have the the sweetness of the dates, the bacon smokiness, the acidity, and then the parsley leaf on top. Again, a small bite just to sort of wake up the palate. It's not really a full-fledged thing. It's just sort of a bite, wake up your palate before you have your meal. Yeah.
These look like those larger, is it, I don't know, is it
Medjool?
medjool?
Yeah,
Like the
I think
medjool
so.
dates?
I think,
Okay.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, these are for those who are not familiar. There's not with a picture. You can't really nothing really to put the size for. Like this is a saucer they're put on, or is it a full size plate? Yeah, because
So
the medjool dates are a lot larger, like about the size of about an inch and a half, 2 inches. They're rather
yeah,
beefy type of dates.
yeah.
Yeah. So you said they roast them first, like is it oven roasted, and then they pour the vinaigrette on top of it?
No, the dates are just dried, but they toss they toss the crispy bacon. They put the vinaigrette onto the crispy bacon. They toss the dates in last minute and put it on the plate. So like I say, the idea is that if things sit in vinaigrette, they start to deteriorate, but you want the bacon to be crunchy, but you also want the acidity from the vinegar to sort of augment the bacon in the date.
But
So,
where's the roasted part in this?
oh yeah, sorry. I think the dates are actually, now that I think of it, I think these dates are dried, but I think they're just roasted a little bit in the oven for color. If you notice, if you look at this date on the left here, it's a little darker on top. So I think they roasted a little bit for a little more color and enhance the sugar a little more, but it's not like
Yeah.
it's
Because the
not,
roast can caramelize the sugar a bit, and the dates
yeah,
already have the skin on them that can have some
yeah.
crispiness to them as well. So yeah, this looks interesting. And the
Yeah.
flat parsley again featured on top there.
Mhm.
Okay. So anything else?
Not much. No, not much to say.
So now we're getting into more of a salad. This is not an amuse-bouche. I mean, this is not complimentary. The first two were complimentary, right?
Yep.
Okay. So here we go. It's salade d'endives, and then this is the endives, or is it endives? What is it?
And Americans say endives, so you can say
Okay.
endives.
Endives or endives, smoked duck breast, then Asian pear, celery, root puree, and fourme d'ambert.
Forme
Forme
d'ambert. So I can
d'ambert.
help you with the French. It's okay. So salade
I
don't.
speak fluent French. You're ready to help me. French is actually my second language. I remember I used to speak fluent French when I was like 5, and then I left France, came back to Kenya, and had to learn Swahili and lost the French a bit. It comes back a bit.
Well, because I was going to say, I know, well, like with French, the reason French confuses people is like English is that there's certain word pairings where there's certain pairings that are silent, other things you pronounce the vowel. Whereas in German is a phonetic language. So if there's an E on the end of the word, you always say it. So it's consistent with that. Whereas English, because English borrows from all these different languages, sometimes you pronounce things, sometimes you don't. And I think that throws off a lot of people who don't know.
Yeah.
So.
And now with the extra having lived in Italy and picked up the Italian, sometimes I get mixed up because when I was learning Italian as an adult, when I was in finishing college, the things that were coming back in my mind was the French from my childhood, and I had to I had to put a double door on my French. So now it also gets filtered through the Italian stuff. But yeah, I like trying out the word. So if I get them wrong, definitely correct me. But let me try them out.
Sure. All right.
Okay.
So we have here. This was a restaurant week item. So this was part of a prefix. I'm trying to remember if I went for dinner. It was 40. Was it $48 for 3 courses or 48 for 2 plus dessert? I'm trying to remember. It's been a little while now. But this is something a little different for me. I love duck, but I thought I'd just try this because I hadn't tried it before, and I tend to order a lot of the same stuff. So endives, for those who don't know, those are a bitter green. They're big in France. They're also big in Belgium and the Netherlands. I think you know Kara, one of my friends on Facebook. She posts there's actually a Dutch national dish. It's a sausage. It's actually mashed potatoes with gravy, but the mashed potatoes have bacon and endive mixed in. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, it's a very Dutch type of dish. The French, they tend to do it more with salad. Typically, blue cheese is common. So the fourme d'ambert I was reading about, that's made from cow's milk. It goes all the way back to the Roman times. So it's from the Auvergne region, which is like, if you picture the map of France, like it's not quite in the middle, but it's like a region below that. So this goes back to, I'm trying to remember, I think it was like early ADs or something I was reading. Blue cheese, I think they use, there's two major veins of, there's 2 types of bacteria they use for blue cheese. There's the Forte, and then there was the other one. It was like it almost sounds like penicillin. I think they use the penicillin sounding one for this. I'd have to look up. I should know more. Well, I should know more about blue cheese, but I don't eat it too often either, so I didn't really look too much into it. So smoked duck breast, you can't see it too well. There's a little bit on the dish though. The Asian pear that's sliced very thin, that's on top, and then the celery root puree is on the bottom. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's the white. That's kind of, if you look at the front part of the dish. I love celery root personally. I think it goes well with a lot of things. Very big in French cooking. Usually you simmer the celery root, usually in milk. Usually you finish it with some butter. It's common people do that, or they make soup out of it. That's also very popular. My old job had that as it. I think a few places I worked serve it as well. I like celery root a lot. I know my dad was growing it one year. We were talking about cooking with it. The one thing you have to be careful of though, the texture of it, there's certain minerals that kind of grow around it, so they almost have this glass-like texture. So when you peel the celery root, you have to make sure to get all the peel off. That gets into the puree and you bite down. That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Thoughts or comments?
I mean, this one, it just looks thrown together. It's like a tossed salad. They just.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you put the Asian pear and duck breast on top. Yeah.
Oh yeah. An Asian pear is, did you say that's the actual pear?
Yeah. So there's a few. Well, it's one of those. It's kind of a misnomer. It's sort of like how we say Swiss cheese, but what we think of as Swiss cheese is Emmentaler, when Switzerland itself has like a few hundred cheeses. So this is a particular variety, because I have to look it up, but I saw a chart at one point that had different varieties of Japanese pears, and they had a lot of similar things. But I think there's a certain variety that we enjoy here that we call Asian pear. But if you were to go over there, they'd have a lot more varieties.
Okay, I'll try to put some on the screen right about now. I'm doing this more screen heavy one. I think it'd be good to put some different foods in there. And I just checked up, but this is just one thing on the little small history of blue mold cheese. It's from castellocheese.com. So the history of blue cheese goes back to the 7th century to a cave outside the village of Roquefort in France. Legend has it that a distracted shepherd forgot his lunch of bread and cheese in the cave. When he returned a few months later, the cheese had become infested with Penicillium roqueforti, a mold that was growing in the cave. And today, this natural mold is refined and used for almost all blue cheeses simply by adding the mold culture to the cheese milk. And for the cheese to turn blue, the oxygen must reach the inside of the cheese, and this is often done by piercing the cheese with thin needles or skewers. And the blue mold then matures inside the air tunnels, developing flavors it gets. And most mold-containing cheeses take 3 to 6 months to mature. In blue cheese, this happens from the inside out. Yeah.
Yep.
And there's different forms. Some of the creamy ones, some of the more like the mature ones, of course, are more crumbly and things like that. For me, this is of the types of cheese in this one, which is Gorgonzola, Castello Double Cream Blue here, Roquefort, Stilton, Castello Traditional, and Danish Blue. For me, I like the Roquefort, the traditional Danish Blue. Stilton maybe, but Gorgonzola, for me, that was one that was very common in Italy, and I just couldn't handle it. It was just, for me, that's more, I think, it's the mouthfeel. It's very slimy and gooey for that one. And there's also vegetables like that. There's a vegetable here in Kenya called Miranda, which I'm not quite sure what the English name for it is, and also has that slimy consistency. It's some mouthfeels, I don't really like it, but blue cheese itself, I like the taste, but not when it's in Gorgonzola. I don't know. Which is your favorite kind of blue cheese?
So, as I say, I'm not crazy about blue cheese in general. I mean, in moderate amounts, it's good. Like with this salad, it worked because there's other things going on. So you have a vinaigrette, you have the duck breast, so it sort of complements it. I remember growing up, Mom would make burgers with gorgonzola and caramelized onions. That was kind of good, but it's like a little bit of gorgonzola to sort of augment it, but not a lot. I've never been big on blue cheese olives. I know people who swear by them, but I've tried them. It just doesn't really appeal to me. I think it's sort of like, I guess, what I said about anchovies in the last video, about in very moderate amounts with certain things it works, but I can't just sit there and eat it. It's too much for me. I don't know.
That is true, yeah. It definitely is a very forte taste, a very strong taste in that, the blue cheese. Yeah. Okay. Right. Anything else on this dish?
Nope, that's all I have.
So you said this was but this is a regular thing on the menu?
This was on the restaurant week menu. So the restaurant week menu changes. There's 2 restaurant weeks for those who don't know. It's actually not a week right now. I think restaurant week is about 3 weeks. It was one of those things that was a week, but it was popular, so they kept expanding it. The idea is certain times of the year when business is slower, these restaurants run deals to try and bring more business to the places. So they run prefix dishes. Some places don't want to participate because they complain they don't make money. Some places are concerned about the kind of people that are brought in. It depends. It depends on the place, because the challenge is that during the summer and also in January, the restaurants are slow, so it's one of those, you want to take everyone you can get, plus you offer a la carte too. So what some places do, it's kind of a scummy move, but they put lousy stuff on the restaurant week menu to lure people into low prices, and then people just get a la carte, and then they say, oh well, I ended up spending money anyway. But it's some places do it, use it as an excuse to get rid of stuff that they don't want. I remember one place I saw was serving rockfish casserole. I just thought, what is this thing? Yeah, it's like, but some places like DB, they do a good job. I mean, they have, for example, we'll see below, there's a petite filet mignon. It's very small, but I mean, when you consider you're not paying that much for it, you can't really complain.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so next one.
Yes.
Okay, so this one now is a chicken liver mousse with shallot confit and mustard with frisée. You said your brother ordered this, but this is something you've had before, right?
Yes. So this was actually, some of these photos I came in with my family. It was actually for my birthday. What was it? 2 years ago now. We came in for lunch. We actually did the restaurant week menu, and Will got this. So if you saw the Minetta Tavern video, you'll notice the shallot confit. It's basically the same preparation. It's shallot simmered in red wine port, usually garlic, different herbs, usually bay leaf or thyme, something strained out. Similar to that country pâté, there's the frisée tossed in a light vinaigrette with some chives, cornichon, the sour pickles, mustard. The mousse, the way it was prepared, I'm not 100%, but usually what it is they blend the chicken liver with different spices and things. I think they cook it probably in a water bath, because again, raw chicken liver you're not supposed to eat. But the way they do it in sort of a loaf pan. So if you notice in the photo here, there's that white around the outside. That's the chicken fat that sort of separates and congeals on the outside. So you just spread that on toast with the other accompaniments. That's what Will had for his appetizers. Pretty good. It was funny. He said it reminded him of cheese, and I was like, I thought that was a funny thing. But some of these do, I guess, because the fat content and the certain spices they put in.
Yeah, this looks a bit dense. Maybe it's just the way it's plated, but this looks denser than the one that you had in the Huertas video. We had some croissant sandwiches with the chicken mousse, and that one looked almost soupy. It was like almost like a whipped cream type of airy thing. This one looks more solid, more like a pâté.
Yeah, because what I was going to say is that with the other one, what some people do is they whip up the mousse and then they sort of let it, I'm trying to think how to describe it. It's like they cook it, but it sort of has like a looser shape, and then they spread it. But they cook it enough so you can eat it, but it's not so cooked that it solidifies. With this was made similar to a pâté, so I think it's a chicken mousse style if you puree it with these other things, and you cook it enough so it holds together, but it's still a little dense as you're getting at, but it's not solid like a pâté. It's kind of in between those, I guess.
Okay, so this one is just more reduced in general, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, with the pairings, like I said, this is a French restaurant, as mentioned. So if you've seen the video for Minetta Tavern,
Minetta Tavern,
there's going to be some similar pairings. So this is something that comes from French cuisine, from the actual country, and there's a reason that they go through these things. There's been a lot of tests and things like that over time they develop certain things, flavor profiles that go together with different things, getting the sweetness, getting the tartness of the mustard, getting I want to say, what's this term? I never really understand. What does umami really mean?
So umami kind of means savory. It's not salty. It's not bitter. It's not sour. Bitter and sour are different things. It's not, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's one of those, I know what it is in my mind, but I'm trying to think of how to put it into words. I just think of it as being more savory. For example, people have said that if you put MSG on things, the flavor is a little different than salt. It has an umami flavor. Seaweed is an umami flavor, for one, too. There's something, it's not a salty flavor, though. There's something that, I'm not really sure how to put it into words.
Yeah, it seems to be something that came onto at least I wasn't aware of this term. Of course, if I was more familiar with Asian cuisine, it's something that did come from Asian cuisine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Japanese.
The first time I think I heard it was, there was a restaurant in San Francisco when I was living there called Umami, and they had some really, really good burgers. And it was just like really nice ambiance, kind of dark in the place, more like low key. that was the first time I saw the actual term, and then I've now see it popping up often, and umami this, umami that, and I don't know. But what would it's not a meaty taste. What is, I don't know what to explain, but I was thinking the sweetness not the is it the shallot confit? Yeah, the
Yeah.
sweetness in there, and then you have the mustard, and then I don't know what I would explain the meatiness of the mousse. I don't know.
I think you could probably use umami. I mean, I don't think the French would say that, but you could use that term. And then the mousse itself has different spices in it, so of course you taste those as well. The frisée is a bitter green, but there's a vinaigrette, so you'll get a little bit of acid from that as well. The pickles, as we say, are sour with some vinegar, so you get some acid. Mustard is spice. Now, what's interesting is that they were saying that spice is not technically a flavor, it's more of an assault on the taste buds. So there's no flavor profile. Well, there's no flavor profile called spicy because they talk about the tongue. There's sour and bitter, which are different things. There's umami, there's sweet, there's salty, but
Hmm.
spice is more, it's more a sensation that augments other flavors. It's not a flavor in of itself.
Come to think about it, I mean, is most spices are in general just peppers. It's a different level of, yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So they would say like a cinnamon. Would that be a sweet or is that a spice?
No, that'd be a spice because the thing is cinnamon, it becomes sweeter because you add things to it. Like if you grate fresh cinnamon, have it directly, it's strong. Because the
Yeah,
thing is a lot of the stuff you get in the jars, they grate it and it sits in there for weeks, months, a year, whatever. So it becomes like dust after a while. But if you grate it fresh and put it, it's wow, this is pretty potent. Nutmeg, same thing. Maybe we'll do in the future one of the Austrian places, but it's old school. In Germany, they actually grate fresh nutmeg over spaetzle and potatoes. It's really nice. I mean, that's more of a European thing. A lot of Americans don't do that. They associate nutmeg as being sweeter, but like straight nutmeg, you put a tiny bit on, it's pretty potent. But that's
yeah,
a spice as well. But again, we associate it with sweeter stuff because it's put into desserts where you have sugar and other things. I mean, even pumpkin pie. If you have straight pumpkin, it's not sweet at all. But they
yeah.
put so much sugar, condensed milk, all that. But it's sugar, those spices, we associate that as being sweeter, so that's why people think. Yeah.
That is one of the things that mm, it's a bit. It's not depressing, but it's just something that I've noticed with the United States of America is people have access to all sorts of cuisine, but the forms of those cuisines that they have are simulacrums of what the actual thing actually is. Like for us, one of the typical meals that we have is this thing called pilau, which is something that has come over from the Indians that were brought over during the colonial times of the British. That the Indian cuisine has now become part of what Kenyan cuisine actually is. And pilau is this thing, it's normally this rice that's mixed. Normally, my favorite one is when it's used with goat meat. But then they put actual full little cloves, little kind of crown things with a little dot on them, full cloves in there. You break off pieces of full of stick. Of stick cinnamon. You put in some cardamom, and you just kind of stew it up with the meat inside it, and it's just that's the basic of it. And that is such a the strong smell that comes out of it. Just the
I've
it's
had
just a
that
very
type
hard dish.
I've
Hmm?
had that type of dish, maybe not that exact one, but I've had something similar.
Yeah.
And
So
because
that
in the French cooking too, they also put cloves in different. There's something called a sachet d'épices, which means you could probably tell like sack of spices. And I remember when I was making it in school, you could put garlic, bay leaf, and thing. But I was also putting cloves when I made consomme, the clear soup, things like that. And the chef was saying that's very classical French. They'll put that in their braises and things. Yeah.
yeah. Now with some of these, he said the shallot confit was more bitter than sweet. It just looks like a
No,
sweet
no,
thing
no,
because it looks
no,
like
no, no. I would say that was sweeter.
okay.
That was sweeter because it's red wine, port. Shallots, of course, are like similar to onions, but they're a bit sweeter too, so it kind of works well together. I would say the green is a bitter green, and then there's the vinaigrette, so there's the acidity plus the acidity from the cornichon. Yeah.
Those little pickles, those three little pickles
Yep.
right there. Yeah? Okay. So yeah, these things. That's one of another suggestions is if you like some spice, some kind of thing. If you've only had the powdered version that's in there, chances are part of the positives of the United States of America to me is the access to things. I think it is upsetting to me because people think they've enjoyed the actual thing when it's more a simulacrum, when they can just put in a little more effort and actually get the actual thing. Whereas here in certain places in certain countries, it's something that might be more common in the actual foods, but they don't have access to the wide range of things that most Americans have. If you don't have it at your local store, you can find many places that can have the stuff shipped to you. If you like something in that powdered form, try to find the actual original, like the whole food version of it, and test that out in whatever meals you've been using that simulacrum in, and it'll upgrade your chefing it up to just another level, just give you a boost just by doing that.
Sure.
Okay, anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Now we have this is now an appetizer, and this is again a restaurant week item. This is pâté, which is foie gras and venison terrine, and pickled grapes and cucumber, huckleberry jam, and some Dijon mustard.
Sure. So this was something I had one of the times I came in on my own. So the pâté, it's not just straight venison because you figure venison's pricey, plus it's leaner, so there's pork in there as well. Pâtés in general typically have some pork in them, if not a lot of pork. It's similar. There's a pâté called a grand pear. It reminded me a bit of that, where there's some pork that's broken up, there's some whole pieces of pork, and then there's foie gras in it. That very light, it's sort of like a light brownish thing. I don't know if you can see, it's on kind of the left side of it. That's actually a piece of foie gras. There's pieces of foie gras inside. There's venison meat mixed in as well. But again, venison, a combination of the price point plus it's leaner. You're not going to base it off of venison. So then here you can see the pickled cucumbers. They're cut kind of thin and then pickled. So it's not like a pickle you bite into. It's more of a slice. It's delicate. It's kind of nice. Pickled grapes cut in half. Similar thing. Huckleberry jam, you can see that's the darker thing underneath the radish. And then there's some chervil on close to the pâté. Chervil, for those who don't know, it's kind of like a cross between parsley and tarragon. It's delicate, but has a licorice and sort of a green flavor too. Very nice garnish, very nice herb. It tends to be small and delicate though, so it's one of those you put on at the end. You don't typically puree it or mix it in other things. And then you can see there's 3 parsley leaves on top of the grapes and radishes, and then there's a little bit of Dijon for flavor. This came with toast, of course, which I didn't picture. So
okay,
yep.
I'm telling you, I mean, these things are close. They're in the same family of veggies, because that leaf on the left there, at least on the left on the screen, might be on the right of the plate, depending. I don't know. That looks like cilantro right there, but I'll trust. And the other thing at the back, on the actual pâté, on the pâté or the terrine, that's cilantro.
That's chervil. No, that's chervil. So that's what I was saying. So chervil, it's think of it like cilantro kind of looks like parsley, but it has smaller, more pronounced ridges. Chervil is probably the smallest out of all of them. It's very light and delicate. So that's the one that's like the cross between parsley and like a licorice flavored thing. It's really nice. I like that herb a lot.
Because this looks more like heirloom type of cilantro, because that's the one that I have in the garden here. Some of the leaves do look like this, and it's not. This is another thing that's different when I go to shopping places in the United States of America. The food looks a bit different than in other places, and maybe now that they have more of these organic, like farmers market type of places, maybe we'll start seeing some of these things come. But then there's a more, I don't want to say cultivar. Is that what they call when it's the older ones? Or the cultivars are the ones that are more selected.
I think cultivars, are more selected. You would say heirloom varieties or something, because the heirloom varieties are the original strains that haven't had things added. I was going to say, we'll also think in terms of regions and what you associate the food with. Like cilantro is big in South American cooking. It's big in, I guess, Kenyan cooking from what you're saying. Chervil is big in French cooking. I mean, it's not to say these other countries couldn't use these items as well, but I think for me, I associate, okay, what items are common in these countries. So for me, I think, okay, the French typically use chervil.
And it's also what happened before we had all this travel and things like this. And this is also one of the things that I think of when I'm chefing it up by myself, is I look at something that, okay, this was done in that way. We've mentioned this before, how there's going to be certain cuisines in the Middle East. It's not going to have pork, but they'll have certain meats in there. So it's like, what if you just do that meal, but then you switch in pork? What adjustments do you need to make to do that? Like in this one, if you have some French cuisine that has it, if you're doing it more to regional to your place, switch out the chervil for the cilantro, and that could just switch some things around. That was kind of interesting to do with these kind of things.
Oh, it's big in, I want to say, I think, I'm trying to remember Southeast Asian. Where else is cilantro big? I'm trying to think now. I always think, I know it's big in...
Eastern Africa, I would say.
It's big in Latin American cooking, especially Mexico. Like a lot of people will put cilantro in guacamole and other things. And I'm trying to think... Yeah, I'm trying to think where else. I think certain Southeast Asian. I'm trying to remember. I've had it in other things too. I like cilantro personally. Not everybody does, but
it seems to be a hit or miss thing for many people. Yeah. Okay, so next one.
Sure.
Okay, so here we go with foie gras terrine. So we're back to the terrine again, and this is paired with Granny Smith apples, Granny Smith apple butter, Hmm. And candied walnuts.
Sure. So the other thing too, I didn't mention it here, but there's also a little bit of candied lemon zest on top. That's the bright yellow. So you figure the apple butter, it's a puree. It's if you've had apple butter, if you go to Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Dutch as they call it, it's really German, not Dutch, but that's what we call it. So it's a little tart, but there's a little bit of sugar too. Then of course candied walnuts. The apples, those are fresh apples cut thin, put on top. You have to do them last minute because it oxidizes. Candied walnuts, a lemon zest enhances it too. Same thing with toast on the side. Again, I didn't picture. And then trying to identify the green here. I think it's a little bit of micro mosh or something. Mosh is like a little lettuce. It's like a smaller version of that. And then there's a pointy thing. I'm not sure. And the greens aren't super important. I mean, the greens will add a little bit of flavor, but they're more presentation.
Yeah. In many of these platings, they don't even, it's not even assumed to you to even eat the greens, right?
Yeah.
And okay, so with the apples, that is one thing. They definitely do oxidize. It's something that happens. I think there might be a way, maybe if you sprinkle some lemon on it, but there's no point to do that. Might as well just.
What some places do is they actually will get acidulated water, so they get water juice with a little bit of lemon, and then if there's an apple garnish, they'll actually put it in that. But the problem is that starts to break it down. So it's one of those. If you know you're going to use a lot of them, you'll cut a lot of apple julienne. That's the knife cut here. You'll put a lot of them in there. And let's say you have an event or you just have a busy service, you know you're going to use them. You cut a lot of them, put them in, but you'll go through them quickly enough where they'll hold up while sitting in that water, and then they won't get soggy, but they'll stay white, but at the same time, you're going to go through them enough where they won't break down. Whereas other places I worked, it's sort of like what I said about radishes last time, where you cut what you need and you put them in the water, because if you don't, they'll start to deteriorate and then you can't serve them. But at the same time, if you were to cut order by order, well, they're going to start to oxidize, and it's not efficient to do that during service at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, this one is a bit of a difficulty level on the terrine on making that. And the foie gras, of course, is a considered delicacy. I think it's more common now. And if you're okay with the process that it's made in, which is something that is problematic to a lot of people for very understandable reasons, it's something that I think with these two dishes, if there's many other things on the appetizer menu, these are things that it's maybe unlikely for you to actually be making it at home. So it's good to try it when you see something like a terrine out there, in my estimation.
I was going to say, I mean, we talked more about foie gras in the Huertas video, if those want to see it. I'm not going to rehash the whole process here. I mean, if you can see that, because if I explain it every time we bring up foie gras, it's going to be a bit much.
We might just refer back to that a bit, but it's a thing. It's not unknown out there, and you understand. Now, with the candied walnuts, what's the process? Is this just when it's covered with maybe some honey and some sugar and some butter, then roasted for a bit?
Yeah, typically something like that. You toss it in there, usually some spices thrown in. You roast it in the oven a little bit so the sugar can sort of caramelize on the outside. And then typically what they do is they just do the whole walnut pieces, but then they usually break them up, so it's like a crumbly thing, and they just sort of sprinkle them over top.
Okay. Interesting. All right, yeah, that's it. Anything else you want to say about this?
That's all I have.
Okay, so moving on to the next one. Here we have foie gras torchon, which is served with kumquat puree and pistachios, brioche, and mâché.
Mâche. So this is similar to the last one. Now, a terrine, the way it's made is that you form it in the loaf pan, as I've described, and you sort of bake it in a water temperature. That's why, if you noticed, with the last one, there's sort of the ring of fat around the outside, because it sort of separates and congeals on the outside. Then you slice it. Now, foie gras does oxidize. I don't think I mentioned that yet. So the idea is you either have to slice it to order, or one place I worked, what we did was we'd slice it, but we do layers of parchment in between so they're not exposed to the air for too long. But same thing with my other examples, where you slice what you need, so you run through that, and then once you if you run through all of that and you start to slow down, then you can slice to order. But you don't want to slice a ton in advance and lay it out, because it oxidizes. Then it gets bitter, plus it doesn't look nice. It starts to turn grayish. It won't, I mean, it's not going to hurt you, obviously, but it's one of those things you don't want to serve in a nice restaurant, because people see that and just are turned off by it. So the foie gras torchon, I may have mentioned it a little briefly, but I'll rehash here. So torchon in French means towel. So typically what you do is you you break apart the foie gras, you clean it out, you mix it with usually different spices. There's the pink salt, which is like a lighter curing salt, a little brandy maybe. What you do is you roll it up with cheesecloth. You roll it into almost a cylinder shape. You keep pressing it down so it's a very tight shape. You poach that in usually stock, or you can do other things. Thomas Keller actually does one with Gewürztraminer wine. He actually poaches it in the wine itself. And then you hang it up and it cools. And then the idea, well, actually, sorry, you drop it in an ice bath so it stops cooking, so it solidifies. And then you hang it up, and somehow I think it's a combination of being cooked, but also it solidifies just by sitting over time. So then you have this nice log shaped piece, and then you slice that into pieces and serve that. Now, this one looked like it was punched out with a ring mold. Some places what they'll do is they'll actually punch it out into different shapes and use the scraps for other things. Some people will actually cook with torchon scraps. Other people will actually reform it and use it to other things. I don't know. I guess it depends on the place. There's some pistachios here, as you see. There's a kumquat puree. I think that's pretty straightforward. Just kumquat simmered with some sugar, pureed. I think there might have been a little bit of vinegar, just a touch to give it a little bit of acid. And then the brioche is actually, it's lightly touched on the grill, so you can see there's grill marks on it, so it's a little crispy, and the charred flavor augments it too. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kumquat, that's a type of citrus, right?
Yep. So typically it's interesting because the skin is actually sweet and the inside is sour. So you typically eat it together. Yeah. It's the inverse of most citrus, but I know it's big in Indian cooking. It's big in, I want to say Southeast Asia, maybe some of the Middle East. I'm not sure. Yeah.
So this is something that could have been borrowed to fusion up the French cuisine. This is not something that was likely done there. Or maybe
no, not native. Okay. Not native to France, certainly, though.
And is the mâche the shrubbery?
Yeah, it's a type of lettuce. This is just like a micro mâche. So typically mâche, you would mix it in with salad. This is just like a smaller version of it. You pick it younger. It's just sort of a garnish, and you can eat it. I mean, it doesn't taste like a lot, but it's more presentation.
Looks like you can maybe cut the brioche in half and do a little mini, kind of like bruschetta, where you put like the tomatoes in the on top, so it's not like a folded over sandwich, where you just cover some pâté, and then of course the pistachios, which are a nice slept-on nut that I guess it's not that slept-on anymore. I think it's a lot more common. People eat pistachio. Don't like pistachio ice cream, but I really like pistachios. I don't understand pistachio ice cream. I think the only nut-flavored ice cream I like really is coconut. There's amazing gelato place in Rome. Anyway, that place it was just so good. But yeah, I don't know. The brioche bun, brioche is more of like a dessert bread, right? It can be
no. So what I had mentioned in a previous video is brioche has a very high fat content. So there's a lot of eggs, butter, sometimes milk or water, depends on the recipes. So the consistency is almost that of a cake. The idea is that it's not something like sourdough, which is lean. This is a very high fat thing. Now you could do sweet brioche as well. I've done French toast brioche. Barbaloup had a French toast brioche, as do other places, but it's at higher fat content, so it goes well. Typically foie gras. You can do different French toast. You can do, it definitely is it's a richer, heavier thing, but you can do sweet or savory depending on what you want.
What is that movie? Is it the 40-Year-Old Virgin, where the person that female is drunk coming back to the bar? She's like, I want some French toast. You remember that movie? You're just like super drunk.
I haven't seen it in a while, but yeah, probably.
Okay, so we're done.
Yep.
On to the next one. Okay, next one here we have a classic tarte flambé. Sure. I'm remembering. It's when the accent is there, you say the E. When it's not, you normally don't say the E.
Yep, that's called the aigu. The aigu slants that way. And then there's the other one, the grave, which slants the other way. So the grave, the aigu, it starts from like the bottom left of the letter and slopes upwards to the right. The grave, it's the opposite. Grave is spelled like grave. Grave, it's more of an S sound.
Okay. So tell us about the tarte. It looks a bit like a pizza.
It is actually. Well, it's funny.
Pizza is a tarte, kind of.
Well, it's funny. So the one of the previous chefs, when I first started eating there, he was still the chef. His name is Olivier Muller. He's French, but he's from Alsace, which is the region that borders Germany and went back and forth between France and Germany. So this is one of their regional dishes. Now, there's actually a good video. There's another chef, Gabriel Kreuther. He used to be the chef at the Modern. Now he opened his own place. It's called Gabriel Kreuther. He's from Alsace. And I got to find it for you, but there's a funny video of him explaining this with his Alsatian accent. This is what we make on the farm in Alsace. We would make this while we wait for the bread oven to heat up because it takes a while to get very hot. So we make scraps of dough. We put creme fraiche and bacon and cheese on top, like something like that. So It's big in all sauce, and that's basically what it was, is that they would heat up the oven, but because the bread oven takes a while, you need a lot of wood to heat it up. It's hot enough to cook other things, so they would take scraps of bread, lay them out thin, do creme fraiche, similar to sour cream, a little bit lighter. Typically bacon. People do different varieties too. Gruyere cheese. Gruyere is a Swiss cheese, but of course big in French cooking as well. And you just sort of lay it out, bake it in the oven. It's very nice. This is one of their appetizers. I mean, Olivier Muller, he's a corporate chef for Danielle, last I heard anyway, so he's one of the higher ups. But he used to be chef of DB Bistro, so he put this on the menu because this is one of his regional dishes.
Now, what makes the sour cream sour? Because fresh cream is not sour.
So creme fraiche means literally fresh cream in French. It's similar to sour cream. It's a little bit lighter. It's just there's a certain bacteria added. I have to look it up. I don't remember off the top of my head, but the idea is it gets like a slightly, I'm not going to say not funky, but like a slightly sour flavor. Creme fraiche is lighter than sour cream, but that's typically, you can mix that in with other things, or in this case, this would sort of take the place of tomato sauce on the pizza. You do that, the cheese and the bacon.
Okay, I decided to jump over here at Spruce Eats because I'm looking for sour cream. I guess I've found some sour creams in places, but it's just a good addition to certain things that I like eating. Sour cream is made when lactic acid producing bacteria is added to dairy cream, resulting in a slightly tart, thick substance. It has long been an ingredient in Eastern and Central Europe cuisines and moved west as people immigrated to other countries, known as sour cream in the UK and the United States. Known as soured cream. So it's a bit kind of like fermented milk, like when you make in the United States, they call it buttermilk. I don't know why they do that. But here they call it maziwa mala or maziwa lala, which just means maziwa milk that has slept, because it stays over and ferments. So it's a different thing that's in there. So yeah, I think it's just kind of some fermenting in there. It's generally added to the end of cooking. Also when serving, it can also be used to tenderize and soften baked goods. So yeah.
So creme fraiche tends to be a little lighter. It's basically the French version of that. If you would have creme fraiche versus sour cream, you would see it's lighter. It's used in similar applications, though. I mean, you can see it in baked goods, as you say. I've seen spreads based off of it. In this case, it's just laid out on the dough and then baked. You can do a lot of different things with it.
Yeah, that's here. That's the next entry here on the Spruce Eats site with sour cream versus creme fraiche. There'll be a link below to this article if you want to check out more on it. And with this, talking about it's like pizza, this might surprise some Americans out there. Again, with the similarities of things in America, we're thinking about this. It's something that I want to do anyway. I want to travel around the United States of America, different states anyway. Steven might have some time to do that. We both like food. One excuse to do this might be to go around and try different restaurants and things like that. But in general, when people think of pizza in the United States of America, they think of like more the fast food, Domino's, Pizza Hut, those type of places. We're not sponsored by these. I'm just name dropping those people. But it's like the circular type of things, a lot thicker of a crust with like an actual crust on the outside, ring of a crust on the outside, some thick tomato sauce on it, then some cheese, and then some toppings on top. That's the basic idea people have with pizza in the United States of America. When I got to Italy, though, this is the typical thing that is pizza. Very few pizzas actually have any tomato paste on it. The ones that do, it's actual tomatoes, actual slices of tomatoes, where it's in general, and most of them are square. Like the whole circle thing is not a common thing, even with like the circular oven type of things that are becoming more like in there. But in general, you go, and this is the kind of fast food type of places. Many pizzerias, when you walk around Rome, you just walk in most Italian places where you just get slices like these, little rectangular slices, and it's just the fresh, nice, kind of like a focaccia type of bread where it's like very airy, very thin, and then just the toppings on top and things like that. There's normally cheese on most of them, but yeah, cheese and just the thing. Sometimes some cream. One of the common things that I was really surprised was like the zucchini flowers, the flower de zucca. I'm forgetting the name of they actually used to call them. The flower zucchini, they put those, but it's just then they have pizza bianca and pizza rosa, and that's normally tells the difference when you have the ones with some tomato sauce. It's only pizza rosa in that sense. But even some of them with tomato sauce, it'll just be tomato sauce without cheese on them. Like cheese isn't a common thing. It's just there's such a variety of different kinds of pizzas in the place, and it's just this is closer to what pizza is in Europe. And when it comes down to it, it does fall into the description of what a tart is, which is some kind of bread and then toppings on that bread.
Well, also, as I sort of got at with the last one, too, just think region by region. I mean, you go to Italy, especially the South, tomatoes, because tomatoes aren't native to Italy, but those regions adapted tomatoes. Alsace, it's the region of France that borders Germany. They're big on bacon. They're big on dairy. Gruyere cheese from Switzerland, which is a little below. I mean, they utilized what was in the area, and it just became a staple in Alsace and one of their traditions.
Yeah. Okay. So anything else?
That's all I have.
Do they have this with? It says this was the regional, so this one they only have it with a specific with the bacon from that region. But do they have this as in any option to get other toppings on it, or do they be like get out of my restaurant if you say that?
So I have to see actually because I think at when Gabriel Kreuther was at the Modern, he had this one, but he also had one with Hen of the Woods mushrooms, and I think his version was bacon, but also onions. So I think overall bacon seems to be the general trend. I mean, but I think people do mix it up. Some people put chives on at the end. I think you could do different things, but it would depend on the place and what they want to do. Yep.
Okay. And so far, all of these are on the recipe. You said some of them were on the menu. Some of them were for the restaurant week, but you can find all this food right now.
So tarte flan, well, the restaurant's closed, unfortunately, right now with the pandemic, but it's supposed to reopen soon. But the tarte flambe is one of their staples because, like I say, the old chef was Alsatian, but they kept this on the menu because it was a popular item and it just became one of their staples, so they kept running it.
Okay. On to the next one?
Yep.
Okay, so here we have escargot fricasse. And this is Oliver Muller. That's the Olivier Muller?
Olivier Muller. So he was the chef from Alsace that I was talking about. Okay. Muller in German means miller, so you figure bordering Germany, so they probably crisscross. So this was one of the most interesting escargot preparations that I had in some time. The next one, what we're going to present is kind of the standard one. I mean, it's not bad, but it's one of these like everybody kind of does at this point. So this one was very interesting. So this is escargot, this chicken oysters. Now, for those who don't know, chicken oysters, they've been called the filet mignon of the chicken. There's this little nugget of meat on the spine towards the thighs. They're this dark meat. They're little, they're called the oysters because the way they're shaped, I don't know, not exactly like oysters, but kind of that like almost oval, like rounder shape. Dark meat, it's very tender, very juicy. Smaller, obviously, chicken's not a huge animal, but it's one of those things that if you serve a roast chicken, it's good to go in and grab them out, or if you break down a chicken and put them aside and use them. So that's what he did here. And those still have the skin on them, as you can see. There's skin on the chicken there. So there's spaetzle, again, Alsace bordering Germany. Of course, spaetzle is big in Alsace as well. That's the German dumpling. Spaetzle, for those who don't know, it comes from a Swabian dialect of German. It means little sparrow. They used to press them, I guess, by hand through holes, and apparently they looked like little sparrows when they came out. Now there's just, you can either get Spaetzle makers or you use a perforated pan where you just push it through. They fall into the water, and then they cook in the water. You pull them out. Now, the spaetzle here, and it's common in the U.S. to saute it so it gets a little brown on the outside. A lot of Germans and Austrians do not saute it, though. They just don't like to do it that way. I guess I'm used to them sauteed. I prefer that, and that's probably why they're doing it here. So what else here? There's a parsley puree on the bottom. That's the green you can kind of see seeping out underneath. And let's see what else here. So fricasse, this isn't really a true fricasse. Fricasse, it's usually a meat preparation. Usually there's a white sauce based on the stock, and then the meat is sort of cooked in the stock itself. Now, this is almost like a deconstructed version of that because the puree is on the bottom, and then there's the meat on top with the spaetzle and other things. So it's sort of like a lot of terms we've talked about, confit and other things, where the term is sort of thrown around, but it's more of a contemporary term that's used. In school, we did learn how to make old school fricasse, but you go to some older school European places and see it, but it's not super common anymore.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like interesting mix of things out there.
Yeah.
With the hazelnuts, how do you say the hazelnuts were cooked? Were they like blanched?
They're sauteed. They're sort of, you can't see them too well, but they're sort of mixed in with the spaetzle. Everything here is sort of sauteed. The escargot, the spaetzle, that's why there's a little bit of color on it. The what else was here? The oysters, the chicken oysters, that's where the skin is a little crispy. And I think what they do is they saute them separately and just sort of put them together. And then the parsley puree goes under first, and then you finish with the fresh parsley on top.
Yeah, this is just one thing as you were mentioning with the chicken oysters. I'm just trying to think, like, we're breaking down. Yeah, I do recognize that part. When we break down, the way I break down chicken, that's normally left as part of the actual backs. And this is, again, why I'm suggesting that if you are out there, you have the opportunity. Most people in America have had chicken. Most people have access to getting whole chickens, but they just never do in their life, so they've never known how to break down an actual bird. There's something cool about that, like maybe it's more from my design background and getting to know information, but you get to know the anatomy of the animal, just again, more appreciation of the things that you're consuming that become you, and you get to know more. It's the circle of life, that kind of thing. So you kind of get into that. But yeah, with this, now if you get a whole bird, this is a piece that I don't think you'd get in the typical way the things. It's normally, in the restaurants you normally get the chicken breast. I mean, in supermarkets it's normally chicken breasts or the wings or the legs and the thighs. You hardly get the backs. Like, and when I break it down, that's normally part of the actual back. It's on the part that would be on the back. So it's interesting that there's specific things with this. And then again, this one of those things that might have been developed from it just being somebody getting the scraps of the food. Like my parents tell me about when they were kids and living in the village in Kenya, they used to be given as kids like the chicken feet, like literal chicken feet, not chicken legs, because the chicken legs are actually the legs. It gets all like the thigh, and it's like the thigh and the shin part is the part that you actually get when you get the actual chicken. And the actual, in fact, in the leg, the chicken leg itself, think of the anatomy of an animal. Yeah, if you look at the anatomy of the animal, that's the entire thigh part, like human thigh, and then the shin bone is equivalent of the human shin bone is the part that we call the drumstick. Then below that, the actual leg. That's something that the kids used to give them. They used to get the legs, and they had the chicken intestines like wrapped around them. That was what was given to the kids as their meal with like the soup and the ugali, as I mentioned before, and normally it's collard greens or different greens that you have. And my mom was actually telling me that as kids, that they used to be the parents used to object when you actually had too many vegetables. Like where the kids were like, "Oh, this kid is eating too many vegetables. Like you need to eat the soup, or you need to eat these chicken legs, or these other scraps of the meats." Like they were actually forcing that more because this back then they didn't really have the knowledge of how valuable actually eating vegetables are. So some people think of this whole like, oh, why don't we go back to eating like we used to? It's like, no, some people used to just eat whatever is convenient, and they had their own kind of things in there, and they didn't have the development and knowledge, depending on the region, of course. But chicken oysters, this looks delicious again. And the escargot, as did you mention, those are the snails that people
Yeah,
probably
the burgundy snails. Yep. So they're the bigger snails. They're grown on farms, usually in France. They're bigger, texture similar to them. What's that?
They eat vegetables, right?
I think so. I'd have to check. I'm not super sure. This I know this preparation interested me though, because like I say, it's one of the most interesting escargot preparations I've seen in some time. Because again, everyone else just does the garlic, parsley, butter, which I mean it's good, but it's one of those I've probably had multiple places several times, so it doesn't really excite me too much at this point.
Okay, yeah, it's something that a lot of people just have the ear to it, but it's relatively if you like seafood, give escargot a try. I bet if you ate it and you didn't know what you were eating at that time, you wouldn't really object. You'd be like, yeah, it's okay. But then just the animal itself looks kind of unappealing. Okay, they have the different snail species have different eating habits. So studies show they all eat different foods. So in the wild, green leaves, dead or alive plants, and crops, fruits, and vegetables, mushrooms, tree bark. And say if you have a pet snail, wondering what to feed them, the best thing you should do is throw them in a terrarium, different pieces of food that you can see. Start with some cucumbers, apples, lettuce, and cabbage, and things like that. But I mean, they are kind of ground running and live on trees and things like that. But it's a relatively clean animal when it comes down to the things it's actually going to consume. It's not going to really consume like garbage stuff where some things where people might think, oh, cows or chickens or goats, maybe not cows as much. Of course, we said the corn fed, that could be something that ends up being negative where most of the thing you're eating is that. But goats and chickens in particular, those things will eat anything. Pigs also will eat anything. So some of that meat that you might think is more appetizing, the things they're actually capable to feed on could actually lead with the meats themselves being not as clean, I guess, in some sense, as something like escargot that might be more less appetizing to some people. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, but like I said, I mean, even my mother, who's a little pickier, tried it and she ended up enjoying it, so I
Okay,
wouldn't write it off.
that's good. And so with the fricasse, you explained what that was, right?
Yeah, so again, it's not exactly a fricasse. I mean, obviously, someone who knows French cooking is going to look at this and say it's not a fricasse. But again, I always bring up the example of confit. Confit is something classically simmered and cooled in its own fat, but obviously, fruit and vegetables don't have fat. So it's one of these contemporary terms. It's become a contemporary term that people just apply to things to make it sound nicer. Yeah.
It's kind of a mutating term, something that's growing, but that happens in the language. It's sometimes I'll allow it, but words should mean one thing in senses. Okay, so next one.
Yep.
Okay, here we have the escargot perlissade. Persillade. And yeah, this one I've had it this way. There was a restaurant I went to. I don't remember the name of it when I was visiting my brother in the DC area. that we had. It was like black shot, black cat. It was a black cat. I think it was black shot. Chat
Huh.
Noir. It might have been Chat Noir. I'll see if I get the name. But I remember the logo was just a black cat, but it had some escargot in this kind of with the same kind of sauté dish too.
Yeah, so not a lot to say about this. Is the one I keep bringing up. It's just purée, I think it's pronounced. It's parsley butter, so it's just like parsley, garlic, butter. You put the escargot, you put the snails themselves in that container. You put the pieces of butter. You make the compound butter in advance, so you cool it down, so it's in a log shape. You put that, you slice that up, and then you put the slices on top, and then you just cook the snails themselves in this butter with that, and then you just pull them out and serve it directly. It's one of those things. They put it in the oven, cook it like that. They hand it to you directly, so that metal's always hot. Be careful. Again, I mean, it's decent, but it's one of these that everybody does. I mean, Bar Balut had this. This place has it. I'm trying to remember if Minetta had it or not. But then this other French place I like, Boucherie, they have it as well. So it's one of those things I don't really order anymore because I've had it so many times. But it's a nice preparation. But I mean, how many times can I eat it? You know?
Yeah, it's kind of like a shrimp scampi, but with escargot, right? In some sense.
A little bit. I wouldn't. I know some purists would get mad at you saying that, but I get what you're saying.
Oh yeah, the name of the restaurant was Le Chat Noir, and
Yeah.
they claim it's the best French restaurant in DC. But yeah, it was pretty decent. Yeah, so this is typically, as Steven said, if you order escargot, this is the typical version you'll find it in. So yeah.
I don't have much else. I don't have much else to say really. It's
Okay.
no.
So moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
Tête de veau croustillante.
Croustillant. Yep.
Croustillant, which is, yeah, go ahead, tell us about this. I read
So this
the
is
like the head, yeah.
this is interesting. So it reminds me a little bit of head cheese for those who are familiar. So head cheese, what you do is you simmer the head of the animal, and the head basically breaks down, and then you pull out the skull and other stuff. And the idea is that the gelatin breaks down, the collagen in the animal's head breaks down and becomes gelatin along with the meat, and then that sort of congeals, and that becomes a solid block of meat and gelatin. And then you slice that into pieces and serve it. So this is the same technique. The only difference here, what they do is after that cooled and solidified, what they do is they bread and then fry it. And then it's served here with something called a sauce ravigote. So ravigote is a classic sauce in French cuisine. It's made from herbs, capers, that's that pickled flower bud. It's sometimes eggs and oil. Now there's no eggs in here. That's just how they prefer to do it. So it comes from the French verb ravigoter, which means to freshen up or to perk up. The idea is it's something acidic, which goes with the fattiness of the meat. And then there's just kind of an herb salad here. So there's some frisée, there's some pieces of chives, you can tell. So a little bit of herbs sprinkled on top. It's pretty much it. It's pretty simple. I had that. I'm trying to remember. I think I went in with my friend and had this nice dish.
Interesting.
Yep.
We're still on appetizers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely look like an appetizer type of thing. So it looks like a bit of, I want to say, interesting. So that's going to be like a dipping sauce of sorts with it. And inside, you said it's more soft, and the outside croustillant, as you say with the name, you can also, I think most people will be able to get that means crust, like the crispiness on the outside. You can see the look of it. But inside, you said is more soft. It's like.
Yeah, so what it is you simmer the head in the, like with head cheese, and the idea is the meat breaks down, but then you pull the skull and the other stuff out. But the idea is that the collagen in the head gets broken down from the heat, and then when that congeals, that becomes like gelatin. So the gelatin is what holds it together when it cools down. So it's braised meat held together by gelatin, if you want to look at it that way.
So it's kind of like pulled pork, but then inside some gelatin, where it's like soft meat, stringy, but then it has the flavorful of like the fats and the things and the gelatin it's holding it together.
Yeah, because the head, you figure a person's head has a lot of collagen, you figure, in your forehead and your nose, all this. So I guess maybe not the best comparison, but the idea is when you cook that down, that breaks down. But then that collagen, it breaks down, it becomes gelatin. Then when it solidifies, it hardens up, and that becomes like gelatin as we're familiar with it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and this is part of the whole hog cooking where you use everything that you're cooking, and this is something I think is left out. And this is part of why I want to go around the United States of America and find places, because I'm sure there's places where whole hog, like things like chitlins, that's part of whole hog cooking. But is that necessarily specifically to the United States of America? I don't know. But then a lot of the cuisine leaves out the different parts. And America developed in a sense where they were people making these different dishes. So I'm sure there's dishes out there that use these other things. Like one thing that people who don't break down animals and miss on, if you like chicken and you haven't had chicken gizzards, you're just missing out on so much. And for me, that's one of like my favorite parts of chicken. So many different interesting things you can do with chicken gizzards. If you like beef or venison or not, I don't know if venison, beef or like goat meat or sheep, the kidneys of them more than sort of the liver. People have liver more commonly, but kidneys are something that's not eaten. And in part of the reason they don't have the kidneys in the United States of America is due to some of the factory farming process. The kidneys burns out antibiotics and other things that are not too positive for whatever animal you're eating. So the type of way that the animal is raised it has the kidneys get to a point where they're generally toxic. Like you can't actually say they're not even they're considered to be okay to eat by humans. But then when you have the grass-fed stuff, when you eat those kidneys, it's such an amazing part of the animal. And then here again with the head, there's probably very few people that have actually had head meat. One for me, I remember growing up was we used to make the stew and things like that. When you actually get the chicken for yourself, now that's another part that my parents were given to eat as kids. But even us as kids, we'd have the entire chicken. You'd make a stew out of it. There's still some meat on it. For me, the neck bone also is a really delicious part. If you like oxtail, try chicken neck, and has very little meat on the meat to effort to eat it, but it's worthwhile for me for some of these things. Yeah.
So maybe we can go over it in a future video, but when Anthony Bourdain was alive, he actually came to Bar Balloon when I was working there, and they were doing a special on charcuterie, and they actually made wild boar head cheese, which was really interesting because they had the wild boar with like the fur and the tusks and everything, and they actually blow torched it off and everything, and they broke and they cooked it and they made that and they served it as a special. It was pretty cool. It was definitely a little stronger, of course, than the typical pig's head, but it was pretty cool them doing that.
Yeah. Okay. So on to the next one.
Sure. So we're going to start the entrees now.
Okay. So,
Sure.
Oh no, we're hitting the hour and a half mark. Do you want to break off now, or let's just hit the one entree? Let's give you a little appetizer of the entrees, and we'll finish off with this one, and then we'll come back to the other ones. Okay, we'll put the picture up as well later on. But this picture, I was like, is your dad like creeping behind your mom? This picture, you said, but no, there's a mirror there. So Okay, so here we go. This is from the smoked salmon club, which is avocado, bib lettuce, tomato, herbed cream cheese, and pumpernickel.
Sure. So we had this at Bar Balloon as well. So basically what it is there's smoked salmon, there's layered in between, there's two pieces of white toast, one layer of pumpernickel in the middle, and then in between the three pieces of bread, there's bib lettuce. It's a very lighter lettuce. It's also called butter lettuce. I like it a lot personally. It's very light, very delicate. Herbed cream cheese. I don't remember which herbs they used. It's been a little while. And then some tomato. This was usually typically on the lunch menu. This was on the restaurant week menu when we went for my birthday. So it's a nice lighter kind of a staple dish. It seems to be pretty popular. I like smoked salmon a lot. I mean, I like smoked salmon a lot more than cooked salmon. I mean, I guess smoked is technically cooked, but better than like a fillet of salmon sautéed, I'm trying to say.
All right. And pumpernickel and herb cheese. What's this on the plate? Is that on the plate that she has? Is that scallops? What's that on the side?
Oh no, that's just a salad with some radishes on top. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said that's the dark leaves or what? It looks like scallops if I zoomed in to see. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a piece of radish sliced super thin. I think it's just like a mesclun mix. I forget which lettuce that is specifically, but it's just kind of like a mixed salad. Yeah.
Okay, and so this is the smoked. So what does club sandwich mean in general?
See, I'm not sure the exact definition because a lot of time, like people will say club sandwich to mean something with bacon in it, but I'm not really sure what the exact definition is. It's it's probably one of these terms that I feel at one time probably meant something, and then everyone just kind of applies it to everything.
Okay, Boston Eater. Let's see what they say here. What is a club sandwich exactly? So Wikipedia is a very useful definition. It happens sometimes. Wikipedia is still good for a lot of things. Some things that are more controversial, people go in and troll and switch things around. But in general, it's still a good source. And of course, once you go to Wikipedia, it's not a be-all, end-all. One of the positives of Wikipedia is most things have links. Don't just take something with the actual source link there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it says a club sandwich is also called a clubhouse sandwich, is a sandwich with toasted bread. That leaves a lot of questions open, but more importantly, does anyone actually call it a clubhouse sandwich? So Wikipedia goes for the list of the classic ingredients: turkey, bacon, lettuce, and tomato, and mayonnaise, allowing for variations on the turkey, chicken or roast beef, etc., and the addition of cheese and condiments such as mustard and honey mustard. It is obligatory that a club sandwich have 3 pieces of bread. Must it be, is it obligatory? That's the question. Must it be quartered and skewered with fun toothpicks? If you add turkey to a BLT and stack it up on top of another BLT, does that make a club sandwich? And let the grand debate begin. Leave a comment and share your definition. So yeah, that's there. It's from Boston Eater. I'll leave a link to that as well there. And what you said, what was the occasion with this? Or just take
Oh, so this was actually my birthday, but we went in for the restaurant week menu for lunch because it was a really good deal, and my parents were actually really impressed. They thought the food they had, the amount and the price was really good for what they paid. And I actually got the foie gras burger, which we'll do later, but I think there was a slight upcharge, but it still wasn't that much, and I still got dessert and other stuff, so it was nice.
Okay, yeah. With this one, I was just in the again. This is differences of different places. Again, it's regional foods. There's an avocado tree in the back here where I live. And avocados just fall off to the ground, and there's eagles, these hawks. I think they're hawks. They're brown eagles. They're indigenous here to Kenya. They just swoop around and occasionally peck at them because they've also developed the knowledge of different foods, and then sending gifts some healthy fats from there. And in the store that I went to today, I just saw those avocados going for 29 Kenya shillings a piece, which is about 25 cents in the United States of America. Oh. And Hass avocados was 129 shillings a kilogram. And Hass avocado in America is like $1 a piece. And that's not a kilogram of avocado. So it's just, avocados are just stupid cheap here in Kenya. But it's something like in America where it's like really expensive to get them. And and most of them, of course, most avocados I think you get in America come from California, which is where the state has a different reservoirs and things like that. California is mostly a desert, but a lot of farming is done there due to different kind of governmental things. And then I think that's maybe 40% of them. The majority of them are shipped in from abroad. And even had some friends who were getting into trying to ship out avocados to Europe. I don't know if they got that project going, but it's just something where, for me, avocados is a common thing. One of my favorite ways to eat avocados is just get the fresh avocados, put them in the fridge with some bananas, preferably the ladyfinger bananas, which are those shorter ones. And then you just put them in there. And this is a situation where I'll use ginger powder and just put that in there and mix together. And that flavorful togetherness, the butteriness of the avocado, the sweet kind of meatiness of the bananas, and the tart sense of the ginger. It's just a good mix. It's a good dessert kind of snack idea for those of you out there.
Well, if you remember too, in the French Laundry video, they had Hass avocado ice cream as one of the dessert things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how that tastes.
Yeah, actually. But how they make it? Do they take out certain things since the avocado itself has its own buttery nature to it? I don't know.
I would think so, because you have enough fat from the avocado, you don't have to add other things. Yeah.
Okay, we might go finish up the meal here and add what your dad got. And see, he got the salmon with the wild rice, crispy shallots, tomato confit, and a sauce of choron.
Sure. So this is Dad really likes his sautéed salmon. He likes stuff cooked through. So you can tell by the marks here it's been grilled. So on top there's crispy shallots. Usually what we did, Barbalud, we had these as well. What it is you soak the shallots in milk, you pull them out, you toss them in Wondra flour. Wondra flour is a cross between, I want to say all-purpose, and I think it's cake flour. It has like a crispier texture when it's fried. So you have to soak them in milk. You pull them apart so the layers are separate. You toss them in that. You fry them. That's a nice garnish on top. So there's wild rice underneath, cooked in stock, the usual, probably a little bit of herbs and other things in there. Tomato confit, that's similar to what I've been talking about. The tomatoes cooked in olive oil with some herbs and garlic, a little bit of salt. You pull off the skin. And then I don't know why I didn't take a picture of it, but the sauce Chiron, that's the hollandaise derivative. So it's hollandaise, but with the addition of tomato. So that actually, he wanted it on the side because I guess dad's trying to watch his calories and fat content. So he had some on the side and put a little bit on. And I remember, it was funny because he ended up enjoying it, and then he started dunking his fries in it afterwards because he really liked it. But it was kind of nice. I don't see sauce Chiron too much, but it kind of worked with this, with the rice and the tomatoes and salmon, because salmon's a moderately fatty fish. So some of the acidity from the tomato, but doesn't overwhelm, but it complements it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with this wild rice again, unfortunately, due to some of the process, like it's good to have the abundance of calories. You don't have just very few people actually dying of starvation anymore. You need to increase that. And there was an issue. I think they were trying to get this golden rice kind of put into India. This has been an ongoing thing for some time, and there was a lot of climate kind of green related people. Oh, this is a GMO. And as we were mentioning before, there's a difference between cultivars and the heirlooms. And most of the food, like bananas, is one of the common things. Where if you see the heirloom bananas, it's hardly any. It's essentially like a chicken neck with the amount of
Yeah.
actual fruit flesh you're getting out of it. It's mostly seeds and things like that. So most of even these general whole healthy foods that you're eating are cultivated in a sense. They've been cultivated through certain things. Many of the actual things that happen with genetically modified foods are actually just a faster way of doing something that used to be done through just selection of different strains and things like that and improving things over a longer time. Yes, there are certain genetically modified foods that I dislike when someone is like, oh, we're going to create a form of corn that they grow seeds that you can't that are sterile, where you can't like actually grow a corn plant and then harvest 100 plants and then keep one of the ears of corn and then replant because it just won't replant. Now, when you do something like that, you're taking something out of the actual creature. You're taking something out of the actual food. Like it's reduced to what a life form actually is, and I think that is one of the more negative ways of it. Some of this, when you have something like the golden rice, was a finding a way to actually enrich the rice, because a lot of the rice that we get right now, they first of all the way it's planted, the way it's processed, it takes out certain elements of it, and then that's why you see a lot of these fortified foods. Where I'd rather the plant be fortified as it's growing,
Yeah.
have extra things in it, extra ingredients, and that golden rice could actually raise a lot of people out of starvation in Italy, in India, because they'll be actually getting more nutrition from that rice compared to the general rice that they have there. And people are like, oh, it's GMO. It's like, no, some of those things actually are positive versus doing a thing where you enrich the foods in the processing point, because either in how you manufacture it and breaking it down, you remove so many of the actual nutrients of it that you have to add now other things into it. And I think that's when you get these situations where it's not as positive. Like look into some of these things, and with wild rice, that's part of the thing. Most people think of rice, probably think of the white stuff. But if you actually look at rice itself, it's not that typical to have it white out in the wild. It's normally these different kind of colors. Even corn itself, this whole yellow corn itself, that's not a typical thing. That's something that has actually been brought in. Now it's actually more unique to see the heirloom things, and I might put up a picture of some of the heirloom that my mom was growing for some time. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad grew some heirloom tomatoes in the garden. We could include those too. Pretty
Cool.
interesting stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was gonna say my dad was the one growing up always taught me about how white bread is bad because they strip all this stuff out of
Yes.
the wheat, the bran, the germ, and the endosperm, which contain the nutrients and fiber, and then they give them to vitamin companies who put them into vitamins, and then people take vitamins and have white bread, and he's like, it doesn't make any sense. You know,
Yeah.
it's all stripped.
It's like, yeah, you're defeating the purpose. I mean, you just want to get it from the source. Get it from the source. I want it fresh. What's
Yeah.
some of that? Okay, so with salmon, that's another thing. Salmon is something that most people think they can cook, but they really mess it up. And when it's done well, it's a really excellent thing, and it's relatively easy to do. It's kind of something that might take some time to get that right level of heat and cooking in, but it's something it's rather simple to make, but not too many people do it right when they cook it at home. They either overcook or they undercook. But once you get it to that right point, it's something that this looks like a meal where, of course, with the club sandwich as well as mentioned, you just put whatever three three levels of bread on it. The challenge level for making these seem to be pretty decent. I mean, the confit is kind of difficult. The sauce shallot, of course, that's with the hollandaise. That can have a bit more of a higher difficulty level. But as you mentioned in previous ones, sauces are another thing where it's good to learn how to make the sauces. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I saw Sharon was interesting because I don't think I've seen that in any other restaurants besides this one. I learned about it in school, but it's not something I don't think a lot of people serve that anymore.
Okay.
Huh,
Yeah. So,
huh.
how do you folks eat off of each other's plates? I really dislike people do that. I don't know if I can care for somebody enough for me to be like okay with them eating off of my
Well,
plate. Like, no.
usually like we cut off pieces and like here have this or
Okay.
something. Yeah.
That's different. That's different if it's like some kind of selection thing in that process. But the whole like just picking off, I'm like, no. No.
I think I offered them part of the burger actually, which we'll do maybe next time or the time after. But the problem was the way the burger is, it's kind of hard to split because it's like if you cut it up, the thing falls apart. So it's one of those like it's really hard to divide up. This you can, of course, but yeah.
Okay. So with that one, I think we'll leave it off here. I shall move the burger up on the list of the things so we can open up the next one to kind of finish off this meal. And I'll also be finishing off the video because I think we've gotten about halfway through with this. And since we didn't have the intro before, I think we'll be able to get it to around this hour and a half mark with finishing off the rest of them. And as I mentioned, wherever you listen to this, there should be some timestamps for the different parts of the actual foods if you want to just jump to those and see what that's about. And you don't have to, just like this, if you go to a restaurant, you're not going to order all this food at once. No. You don't have to watch this entire video at once. You can watch different sections, come back to it, and enjoy this as we go.
Because Danielle Ballud actually has a video where he talks about, he goes, people will get food and then they'll get a burger to share. I was like, I've got a decent appetite. I don't know how you eat all that at once. Like entree, burger, foie gras, and dessert. Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. Okay, anything else you want to say about this restaurant?
No, I mean, I think this went well. I'm looking forward to doing the next parts, especially, the whole thing, but especially the desserts, because again, we haven't covered desserts as much. And I think the desserts here are always impressive to me.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, that's it for me as well. And Stephen, just stay on for a bit longer and just say our goodbyes. But everyone else out there, guys, gals, and everything else in between, thank you very much for coming to this series. Let us know what you think in the comment section. As per usual, if you've been to these restaurants, or if you have other suggestions of restaurants that you'd like to see, other kind of ways you think might be better for us to present this content, let us know. We're all ears, and this is something we're developing together that will be an ongoing thing. And we still will be going back to more of our political, of our other kind of interest things. Just enjoy speaking to Stephen, and soon, maybe not soon, a couple of months, maybe we'll do some of these in person and have some other kind of things in there.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll also bring other people who have been to other restaurants and come in because Stephen can only eat so much. We'll see about trying to expand this in different ways.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure. Okay, cool.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.